Hello, good morning friends. Welcome back to your favorite channel Code One Digest. Today in this tutorial we are going to learn Nestjs Microservices running in a Docker container and using PostgresDB as our backend. Yes friend, I'll explain you step by step how to create Nestjs Microservices from scratch. Then I'll explain you how can you create the Docker image, container image of this application, then how to deploy and run that application into a Docker container, how to connect this application to a Postgres database. So all of that we are going to learn in this tutorial. It is going to be very exciting and very informative tutorial today. I'm sure many of you would have that query that how can I connect my application running in a Docker container with a database running in a host machine, right? So this is a tutorial for you. In this tutorial, I'll explain you how can you connect your application running in a Docker container to a database which is running on a host or on some remote machine. Right friends? So stay tuned and watch this tutorial till end. Friends, I have created a complete playlist of all Nest.js tutorials and Nest.js projects. The link is there on your screen. Go and watch all these videos. It is going to be very exciting and very informative videos for you. If you want to learn Nest.js, if you want to learn Node.js, if you want to learn JavaScript, if you want to learn TypeScript, then this is a playlist for you. It has all the concepts of TypeScript, Nestjs Framework, and Node.js server, right? So watch this tutorial till end. The link is there on your screen and also given in the description section of this tutorial. Friends, this is the agenda of this tutorial today. I'll explain you what is Nestjs Docker container project all about and how can we connect with a PostgresDB. I'll explain you that with the architecture diagram. I'll show you what are we trying to achieve in this tutorial today. Then I'll show you how can you create a Nestjs project from the scratch, setting up of the Nestjs project, installation of the dependencies. Then I'll show you step-by-step coding of the controller classes, service classes, repository and entity classes, module classes, and so on. Then we will be preparing a Docker file so that we can create a Docker image of this project. I'll show you how to create a Docker image of this project using a Docker file. Then we will deploy and run that Docker image into a Docker container and will connect to a PostgresDB. At the end, we'll be testing our application calling the API via Postman tool. Right, friends? So stay tuned and watch this tutorial till end. After watching this tutorial, you will be able to create production ready enterprise level application. Friends, these are some prerequisites for this tutorial. You should have a Node.js 16 and above. I'm using 18.14.2 and I'm using Nestjs Framework 10.2.1. NPM version is 9.5.0. Postgres 12. Docker I'm using 20.10.14 and VS Code editor for my coding and Postman API tool. Right friends? So these are some prerequisites. If you don't have the software, you can arrange it and then you can continue with this tutorial. So this is architecture of our application. If you see, this is my host machine, the outside one. Okay, this box is my host machine. Now inside that I'm running a Docker container and in host machine I am also running my Postgres database. So I'm deploying my microservice application image into this Docker container. This is a Docker image of my application, microservice application. So application is running inside Docker container and it has to connect to my database running in my host machine, right? So the application will connect to the database through a bridge network. So I'll explain you what is host.docker.internal when building the Docker image and all. So this I'll explain you that. Just remember that microservices running in Docker container will connect to a database running in a host machine. Now here we have done the port mapping where we have exposed the 3000 port of this application and we have mapped it with the 3000 port of our host machine so that we call API on 3000 port. right? So this is the port mapping that we do, and this port mapping we do in our Docker run command. So in Docker run -p option is there for the port mapping. There we'll give 3000 of Docker container to 3000 of host machine port. So that will do, right? So you will be calling a API from a host machine. The request will go inside a Docker container. The application is running inside Docker container, and it will get the data from database, and that is running in our host machine. So this is the architecture of our application. Many people have asked me that how to connect application running in a Docker container to a database running in a host machine. So in this tutorial, I'll explain you how you do it. We'll also explain you the different network modes of Docker container, how it works, and what is the meaning of host.docker.internal. So we'll understand all this. Stay tuned and watch this tutorial till end. Okay, friends? Okay, friends. So now let's start with creating a project. Okay, Nestjs project. So go to a directory where you want to have your code base, your project. So I have created this directory, Nestjs tutorial, then Nestjs PostgreSQL TypeORM project. So this directory I have created. I'll be creating all my files and folders here, right? So let's start with first command. So very first command to download the Nestjs library. So open a command prompt here at this location. I have opened my command prompt and take this command npm I -g @nestjs CLI. So this will download all required Nestjs library and CLI. I'll share all these commands as a part of my project in my GitHub repository, but you can make a note from the screen as well, right? Just place enter. It will download all the libraries and dependencies, required modules, right? Now next command is to create our Nestjs project. So that is nest new project name. So make sure that you have Nestjs installed in your local so that the nest command is working for you. Nest new project name, right? So here I have to give Nestjs PostgreSQL TypeORM project. So it will create all the files and folder for me. It is asking me what is the package manager I'm using. I'm using npm. It will create all the boilerplate code for me. This is a ready to run application. We can run and see that it is working fine or not. So as this project is created, we can run it and see that it is working fine. Then later we'll add the functionalities as per our requirement. So we are going to write 3-tier application, that is microservice layer, then business layer, and then repository layer. I'm going to create a book library project where I'll be storing the book information, and I'll having a API to retrieve the book information. So we'll be creating a book microservice, getting the book information and also saving the book information. Right, friends? So this project is created. cd nest will go inside. Yes, so we have all this file. Now what I'll do is I'll load this into my VS Code and I'll show you that. Okay, friends. So now I have opened my VS Code editor and I'll just open that project into VS Code. Go to open folder, give the path of that project directory and say select folder. It will load all the files for you here, right? So let's understand the project structure first for this Nestjs project. You will always see that your package.json is there because it is a JavaScript Node.js project. It is based on Express.js. If you know, the Nestjs is based on Express.js. So you will see a package.json at the root folder. This is important for us. We will see that in a while. And you will have a source folder where you will see these 5 important files created by default for you. This is where your main application is there. So this is the main.ts where the application is starting. Then it will have a service class. This is provider. We have module class. Then we have controller file where we define the routes, controller, test file. So these are the 5 main files that you will always see created for you when you create a Nest project. everything organized in Nestjs in form of modules, right? So this is nothing but your root module. We have app module.ts. This is our root module. And any new feature that we add, we will add as a separate module, and respective controller, services, repository will add there, right? Okay, let me show you the package.json file first. So this is a package.json where we already have some predefined scripts given to us, like start command to start the application, start dev to run it in a watch mode so that we can see more information during development. And there are various other scripts are available. In dependencies, we can see Nest.js, common, core, platform express, and few other dependencies like reflect metadata and RxJS. So this is coming out of the box. We will add the required dependencies as and when it is needed, right? So very first thing what we'll do is, without wasting time, let me run this and show that this is a ready to run application out of the box. Okay, let me go to the command prompt again and run this application with npm run start command. Let us do that. Okay friends, so I'm now back in my console terminal, and here I have all my project files. Let me run npm install first so that all the dependencies get installed. Then you run npm run start. Okay, we saw that script, start script is there to start the application. Just hit that. So it will now run the application for us. Yes, so it says Nest application successfully started. So this application runs by default on port 3000. Let us hit the 3000 and see what happens. Okay friends, so I have opened the browser and let me hit that HTTP localhost 3000, right? See, so we are getting hello world, and now I'll show you the basic code and component that is available with us right now. So let me show you the main.ts file first. So this is our main.ts where we have a bootstrap function where we are starting our application. If you see, we are starting our application with nestfactory.create. It is giving us the instance of app, and then app.listen we are doing like the way we do in our node.js, right? Any node application and listening on port 3000. Hence it is running on port 3000. No fancy item here, very simple. Next we'll go to the controller. This is where we have defined our routes. So right now we have not defined any specific path, hence slash is hitting this endpoint. Okay, localhost 3000 is hitting this get method, and what it is returning, it is calling the app service.hello. So if you see, we have injected our service component here. So our app service is there. Let's go to app service. The control is coming here to app service. This is a provider where we have injectable decorator, and we are saying that this component is injectable in other component. Hence, we have injected this service into our controller. And when the control comes here, it is just returning hello world. That is what we saw in the browser, right? Now, the next important component that we should understand in Nestjs is a module. Anything and everything you write in Nestjs has to register, be it controller, be it provider, be it repository, be it ORM. So you have to come and declare it here. If you don't register it, it will not work. It will not be loaded by Nest dependency container. It will not load it. Import array is empty because we don't have any custom module as of now. If we have any custom module or any third-party module that will go inside this array, we'll add it as a part of the exercise. And controller array will take the list of controllers, and provider will take the list of all providers, be it service, be it repository or factory class or anything like that will go here. But this is a root module. I would not recommend to write or update here. For any new feature that we build, we will have the respective module class, and we will add the controller and provider in that module class. And then finally, once that module is ready, we'll come and import that module here in this root module, so that we are stitching the module with each other, right? That's how the application works. We'll see that. I'll show you. Clear? I hope this is clear with you now. Friends, before we proceed in this video, I request you to subscribe this channel to grow Code One Digest family. Friends, I am creating a lot of quality videos on programming, coding concepts, design pattern and design principles, cloud and container technologies, but I'm not getting subscribers. I request you to like, share and subscribe this channel so that I can grow our Code One Digest family. Thank you. Now, let me create the book controller, book service, and book module for my application. As we are going to create a book microservice in this tutorial, so I would need a book controller where I will define all the routes. I will have a book service where I'll have a business logic, and I will have a book module where I'll register all my book controller and providers. Right, friends? We'll do that now. Okay, friends. So now what I'll do is I'll generate the controller, service, and module for my project. I'm going to write book microservices, hence I'll need these three component. So here is the command. This is a nest command, nest hyphen hyphen generate controller book. So it will automatically create book controller. Same way, I'll say nest hyphen hyphen generate service book. It will generate a book service.ts for me. Same way, nest hyphen hyphen generate module book. It will generate book module.ts for me. Let me run this command one by one and show you. So let me stop my application. You can do a control C and it will stop the application. As simple as that, right? And now I'll just say nest hyphen hyphen generate controller book. So it will create a directory and it will create book.controller.ts, right? Now, same way, I'll create a service. And the good thing when we create with this command is this controller and the services are getting automatically adding it to our root module.ts. Now I'm creating the module, right? So these three things are created. Let me go to the code. The book folder is created and in that folder we have book controller, book service, right? And this is a book module. It has done automatically is book module is added here. That is right. And it has added this controller in here. We want this controller to be added in our book module. So what we do is we'll take this. So I'll copy all this and paste it here. But we don't want anything into import. We don't want app controller to be here. We don't want app service to be here. Yeah. I'll say import book controller. I'll say import book service. Everything looks fine. And now I'll go to my root module and I'll remove the book controller from here, book service from here. This looks fine. And our book module is already imported here. That means when our root module starts, then it will automatically pull the book module. So book module will start and then book module will also start this book controller and services. Right, friend? That's how the application starts.
Really?
So this is done now. We have the controller, service and module created. Now, very first thing to connect our database is our database configuration. So that we have to provide in our .environment file. Okay. But before that, we should be installing the .env module. Okay. So here is the command npm install hyphen hyphen save .env. So this package, this dependency will get added to our package.json file. Let me do that. This is required because we are going to read the .env file where I'll be giving all my database configuration and other configuration. So if I go back and see my package.json, I'll see the .env is added, right? And now what I can do is at the root, I should be adding a .env file. Now I should add the .env file. It will refer this and here I'll give my database configuration. Okay friends, so here is my database configuration I'm defining in .env file. I'm saying database and then database host is localhost, database port 5432, database name Postgres, database username Postgres, password is also Postgres. Keeping it simple, this is very simple configuration. I have that database created in my local. I have Postgres running in my local. If you want, you can run it in Docker. Now, I will create a configuration.ts file where I'll be reading this from environment and initializing our ORM. What we want is we want to initialize our ORM and it should be ready, it should be connected with my database as my Nest application is starting. Okay, with the startup, I want my ORM to be up and running. So for that, I'll be create a directory here. Inside source, I'll create directory config and then I'll create configuration.ts. Okay, so here I'll be defining all my configuration. I will be loading all my configuration in this file. Let me do that. Okay friends, so this is my configuration.ts and I've added export default function where I have defined database and it has all these properties. I'm giving type Postgres because it is Postgres database. Then host, it is reading it from process.env. It is reading the database from my environment file, port from environment file, database username from environment file, password from environment file, database name from environment file, and so on. Second thing is now I will initialize my type ORM because we want our application to connect to database. So we'll be using type ORM and we need to install it because that dependency is not there in our package.json as of now.
What? I can't. I do not understand.
Type ORM is not there. So I'll show you now how to install and get it added here. Okay friends, so here is a command to install type ORM. So these three package I'll install. Let me do that. Now this will get added to our package.json. Yeah, so it is done. Now the packages are installed. Let me see that in my package file, package.json file. Yes, so it is pg, type ORM and Nestjs type ORM is added. Yeah, so we have the type ORM now and we can write a code to connect to our database and that we do in our module class. I'll show you that. Okay, so this is my app module.ts file. This is our root module and you remember we have book module added here. So now in import we have to do some changes. Very first thing we want to load our configuration file. Config module dot for root and this is our configuration. But before that we have to go into package and add one more dependency for Nestjs config. So this Nestjs config will give me a config module and config service out of the box, right? Just save this. Let me run the npm install so that that package is now downloaded. As we have added a new package, so it should be downloaded first. So now it is resolving the config module that is done. Now what we'll do is import configuration, right? So it is loaded now. It is a small configuration here, right? So now the application start configuration will be loaded and this will read this configuration from our .env file. So till now we have sorted. Now next step is to initialize our type ORM. Now I'll add the type ORM module. So this type ORM module is coming from our package type ORM that we have installed. So the very first thing you have to do is import type ORM module. So it is coming from Nestjs type ORM. Type ORM module, we are importing the config module that we have loaded because config module has the configuration loaded and configuration has our database configuration defined in env file, right? So it is importing that. Then using a factory config service is also a class coming from our config module, right? Config service, here we are setting all the values, database host, database port, username, password, database, entities. These are pretty standard way of creating connection to Postgres. So when Nest container is starting, it will take care of creating this ORM module and it will make sure that the connections are established with the database using this configuration, whatever we have given in our environment file. So it will try to connect to this server, this database server. Let me run this and see if we are getting any error or so. Okay, so let me go to my console and start my application and see if it is starting. Yeah, now I'll say npm run start dev because I want to run it in a watch mode to know if there is any error or any problem in starting the server. Zero error found. Unable to connect to database. Okay, friends. So while starting the server, I found that I'm getting this error that client password must be a string. It is unable to connect to database, right? Then I was debugging and found that my mistake is I created this .env file inside the source folder accidentally. Our environment file must be at the root of my project like this. Okay, this is the root of my project and .env file must be at the root. I accidentally created inside the source folder, so I moved that file out of the source folder. Now it is at the root, and now let me try running that command again. Npm run start dev. So this is how it helps us in debugging when we run in the wash mode. So these are silly mistakes that you should also remember. I accidentally created the environment file inside the source folder. It should be at the root folder. I know that. So right now it is connected. That means our database configuration is working fine. Our ORM is also getting created. Now what we'll do is we'll create few entities so that it is able to connect over a database, right? Let me do that. Let me go back to my VS Code and then we'll add few entities here. So before that, we'll add one folder, model model, and inside the model, I'll say book.ts. And if you see here, we have used synchronize true. So when we define our entity, whatever attributes we define, it will automatically create the column and table in my database, right? So we should not be using the synchronize true in production. Otherwise, it will override your data. We should make this false in production. But in dev environment, when you are doing development, whatever properties you define in this entity class, same column will get created in the Postgres database. Let us do that now. Okay, friends. So now I have created the book entity class. So it has ID as a string as a primary key and it will accept UUID as a value. Then I have book name as a string with a length of 300 characters. Then author name as a string with 300 as a character. Then release date and time. Okay. Then created date and updated date. Okay. Now what I'll do is let me start my server and see if this is getting created inside our database. And the very important thing that we forgot is entity name book. Now let me start my server and see. Yes, so this is restarted my application. Let me go to my DB viewer and see if we are having the table created. Let me refresh this. Yes, book is now created here. We have a column ID, book name, author, release date and time, create date and time, update date and time. That means we are now successfully connected to the table. And as I said, the synchronize is true. So it is automatically creating the table for us internally.
Wow.
Okay, friends, so now we are able to connect to database and table is also created. Now it's time to perform certain operation on database. Our book service layer in this class, we will write few methods which will insert and retrieve data from the table, right? So let me do that. Okay, friends, so very first line that I have imported the logger from common services and inject table repository decorator. So this inject repository is coming from Nestjs TypeORM. So now logger is equals to new logger book service dot name. So we'll have a logger available to log any message. Then I'm defining a constructor here at this line. Constructor using inject repository decorator on entity book because book is our entity. That is also imported here. And then repo, I'm creating an instance of repo repository book. Okay. So now I have a repo available, this repo available inside this service. Now I'll write few methods to get all, get one, and save our book objects. Okay, so now I have written one method to get all the books available in our repository. So this will give me all the books available in the repository. Now I wrote another method, get one book here by passing ID. So I'll pass an ID and we'll try to find that book. Okay, get book by ID. So how is the syntax? this.repo.find1. Find1 is the method, and we have to give where clause where id is equals to id. Okay, so this id I'm passing here, so it will get me one single book, right? Now I wrote another method, save method, to save book into a repository, where I'm saying it will come as an instance of book DTO, and then I'm calling this dot repo dot save book. It is always a good practice to keep our database objects separate than our API objects. So let me go and create the book DTO. I will create inside the book only. I'll say book dot DTO dot ts, right? This is created. Now I'll say export class book DTO. This class we have created. Now what I'll do is I'll take all the attributes that we have here into our DTO as well. But only difference is we will not use this ORM decorators. These decorators are not required. So we have our DTO ready. We'll come back here. I'll say import book DTO, right? It is done. So we'll be sending the data in form of DTO, and same we'll use in the our controller as well, right? So this service class is ready. Now it's time for us to create a controller class with the routes. Okay, so now I'm in my controller class, and here in this class we'll write the routes. We'll write three routes: get all, get one, and then save, right? So we'll create three routes in this controller. So very first thing that we'll do here is logger, right? Import the logger, and then I'll create an instance of logger is equals to new logger, and say book controller dot name, right? Now I'll say constructor private book service colon book service. So this is added. That means this book service we have injected into our controller. Now this book service is available. So we can use this book service instance to make call to respective methods in book service. Now let me define my first route, that is get all. Okay friends, so now I have written my first route, get all. Okay, if I'll say slash book slash all, then the control will come here, the request will come here, and then it will call this dot book service get all, right? It will get me all the books from the database. Very simple, right? Okay friends, so same way I wrote another method, get by ID. Okay, so in this method I am passing ID as a path variable. Okay, and we are reading it, that path variable, through param decorator. So we'll have a param decorator params, and then we will be returning any. Here I am calling this dot book service dot get one params dot id. Okay, we have to provide the ID of my book into our URL so that we can fetch that book from the repository, right friends? Okay friends, I wrote another method save, okay, to save the book into a repository, where I am using body as a decorator. Item body is my object, and it is of type book DTO, right? So I'm expecting that my JSON will come exactly like my book DTO. It will have ID, it will have book name, author, release date and time, create date and time, update date and time, right? So the data will come in this book DTO format in item body, and then I'm calling that this dot book service dot save in item body. So we have completed the controller as well. Now it's time for us to run if we are able to fire the query, if we are able to hit these endpoints.
Wow, that's amazing.
Okay friends, so now it's time for us to build a Docker file for our application so that we can build a Docker image for it to run it in a Docker container. So let me show you a Docker file that I have created for this project. So this is my project and this is a Docker file. So let me explain you this line by line. The very first line that we write here is from node 18. That means I need node 18 to run my application. Okay. I need Node 18 to run my application. Hence, I'm downloading Node 18. Then I'm setting my working directory as user source app inside my container, inside my virtual machine. Okay. Then I'm copying the package.json to the container machine. As per the package.json, I'm downloading all the dependencies required, right? By running the npm install command. It will download all the libraries, Node.js libraries and everything. Then I'm copying all the files that I have from my local to the container location. And at line number 15, I'm exposing port 3000 as I'm running my application on 3000. So we have to expose from container to our host machine so that it is accessible outside the container. At the time of running this application, we'll be doing a port mapping where we'll be mapping this Docker port with our localhost port. And this is the final command to start our application. Okay, friends, I hope this is clear. Nothing complicated here. It is straightforward Docker file. Now what I'll do is I'll show you a command to build our Docker image for this project. Okay, friends, so now let me show you the command. So this is my Docker build command to create a Docker image for my project, Nestjs project. So Docker build is a command. -t is a tag. So we have to assign a tag to our image. So this is a tag name that I am giving. I am giving a tag code1 digest slash Nestjs Postgres TypeORM project. This tag will get assigned to the image and dot is for the current directory because I am going to run this command from the project root directory wherever my Docker file is there. So I have to run this command. Else I have to provide the absolute path of my Docker file. So instead of that, I'm giving dot because I'm running this command in a directory where my Docker file exists. So let me copy this command and now I'll build my Docker image. So this is my project directory where I am. Let me check what all images I have. So Docker images. So these are images available in my local which are quite old, 4 weeks old and so on. So, and this is my project directory. I have a Docker file here, right? Cat Docker file. It's the same file what we saw in our Visual Studio Code. So now we can build our image. So let me copy the command to build that image. Okay. So I've copied the command and I'm now building it. Let me hit this. It has started building the Docker image for my Nestjs project. Yeah, so it says it is done. Let us see if the Docker image is created. Docker images. So this is the Docker image which is created and it's of size 1.5 GB. So now it's time for us to run this Docker image into a Docker container and see if it is able to connect to PostgreSDB running in my local host. Okay, so PostgreSDB is running in my host machine, my local machine, and application will be running into a Docker container. So how do we connect our application running into a Docker container to a Postgres running into a host machine? So that we'll understand now. Okay, the command looks like this. This is a command. Docker run is a command. Docker run -e is for environment variable. So I'm passing environment variable database host as host.docker.internal. I'll explain you why it is like that. Okay. Then -e database port 5432, -e database name Postgres, database username Postgres, database password Postgres. So all these are environment variable. Why we need all these environment variable? Because if you see our application expects all this to come from environment process.env.database host, database port, database username, database password, database name, and so on. Our application expects in our configuration.ts to come from environment variables when we run in our local host by providing this variable in our .env file, right? But now as we are running into a Docker container, so we have to give all this environment variable like this to start our container. And -p is for port mapping. This is to map the Docker container port 3000 to localhost port 3000. This first one is the localhost port and the second one is the Docker container port. So we are mapping the Docker container port with the localhost port. At the end, we are giving the tag name, that image we want to deploy here. So this is the tag of that image we want to deploy. Now coming back to the host, why are we giving database host as host.docker.internal? So whenever we give host.docker.internal, that means it's try to refer the local host machine, the host machine. As we know, the scenario is our database is in localhost machine and our application is running into a Docker container. How is that application will connect to a database running into a local host in hosted machine? So Docker basically works with a different network modes. You would have heard that Docker works with a different network mode. One is the bridge mode, default mode for a Docker to work. Second is the host mode. So assuming Docker is running in a bridge mode, right? So in that case, when it runs in a bridge mode, host.docker.internal refers the host machine. Host machine where the Docker container is running, where the Docker application is running. So localhost 127.0.0.1 and IP is not going to work here. Hence, we have to use host.docker.internal. Remember this. This is very critical. Whenever you want to access an application running in your host from a Docker container, be it database or be it cache or be it anything else, right? And your Docker is running in a bridge mode. That time you should use host.docker.internal. Fine, friends. So now what I'll do is I'll take this command and we'll try to start our container. Let me copy this and let me go to my console. Let me paste this and let me run. Yes, so starting up. Yeah, so it says the application has started now, right? Let me hit my APIs and see if it is giving me the results. Here is my postman and this is my collection where I have few commands to test my application. So very first endpoint is the post endpoint to save the book information into database. Let me type my test book code one digest. Yeah. So now let me hit this and if I and when we'll see if we are able to save this book. Yes, so it says 201. It's created. So book name is this, author is this, release date is this, what we have given here, and this is the ID. This is a primary key of my document, right, friends? And these are additional column which are there in my PostgreSDB, created time and updated time. Okay, so that means our application is working fine. Let us also see a log in our Docker container. These are our application log. It says saving. Okay, now next endpoint to test is to get all the books that we have in our database, Postgres database. So what I'm saying, localhost 3000 book all, get me all books. So yes, I got 200 response and I can see one, two, three books are there. And this is what I have added just now, my test book. Let us try to get book by ID. So let me copy this ID and I have another endpoint, get book by ID. So I'll just replace this ID with my book ID and hit this. Yes, so I'm getting the response. This is ID, this is a book name, this is the author, and these are timestamps. Right, friends? So that means our post and get calls are working absolutely fine with PostgreSDB as a backend and application running in a Docker container. And let's also validate the data in our PostgreSDB. So this is my PostgreSDB, database Postgres, schema public, table book. Yeah, so this is my table, and these are the column I have: book name, author, release date, and so on. So let me fire the query here. We have three records. This is the book name, and these are the author, and these are the timestamps, and this is a primary. I hope the concept of accessing the application in host machine from a Docker container is now clear to you. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, so do subscribe to my channel to grow Code Digest family. And you can find the Docker file and all this code available in my GitHub repository. Friends, if you like this video, so give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for the more interesting videos. Click on the bell icon for the latest video notifications, and do not forget to share this video with all your friends and colleagues. This is very useful information for students, beginners, and software engineers. I am putting a lot of efforts in creating these contents, so please help me growing the Code Digest family. Please subscribe to Code Digest channel for the latest programming and technology related videos. Thank you.